This is the third video of patches inspired by exploring the different VCA modes on the Moog Matriarch. I'm going to do 3 variations of a patch in this video that are all based on the simple basic patch I came up with in the first video I posted a few weeks ago. As always, there's an index in the description and links to patch diagrams. But before we get to the tutorials, here's a short demo of the patches we'll be working on this time. Alright, we're going to start off with the basic patch from a few videos ago, but for this little demo I've added a little reverb just to sweeten things up. I'm using a Lexicon 224 plugin by Universal Audio. In most of my videos I don't add any external processing. I want you to be able to duplicate these patches easily at home and most importantly hear what the Matriarch sounds like on its own with no studio tricks. But for these videos I've decided to add a few effects here and there and talk about why I'm using them. This reverb is a digital reverb. Obviously I'm using a plugin, but what I mean is it's modeled after a classic digital reverb. I'm using a Hall algorithm. The 224 has a crossover switch which allows you to split reverb times based on a selected crossover frequency. So I've got the crossover set very low, down to 200 Hz. I've set the base frequency decay time to its minimum, 0.6 seconds, but I've cranked the mid decay time, which affects everything above the crossover, to 10 seconds, and have the treble decay, which is really just a high-pass filter, fully open. So the idea is to get an artificial reverb sound with lots of highs, out of this world type sound. This patch is already pretty dark, so the reverb is used primarily to emphasize the high frequencies. Anyway, I think it sounds cool. Okay, back to our patch. Like I said, our starting point is the basic patch from 2 videos ago, but I'll put a link in the top corner and in the description. Here's a patch diagram if you don't want to go back and watch that video. The focus for this video is going to be VCA Drone Mode, so let's switch over to that. Remember, in drone mode, the VCAs are open, no modulation. It's as if the VCAs are bypassed, which of course they aren't, as we'll see in a minute. But what you hear is basically the filter output. The filter envelope generator modulates both filter 1 and 2, and the amp envelope generator modulates nothing, so it's free to use for whatever we want. So I guess the most obvious thing to try first would be to have the filter envelope generator modulate one channel of the filter, and the amp envelope generator modulate the other. So first make sure the filter envelope amount knob is centered, otherwise the filter envelope will continue to modulate both filters. So I'm going to patch out of the molt, which is being fed by the filter envelope generator, into an attenuator. The attenuator will control the amount of modulation we're going to send to filter 1 cutoff. Easy peasy. And let's just adjust the filter and maybe tweak the envelope a little bit. Okay, now let's get that amp envelope generator, which in drone mode is doing nothing. I'm going to patch the envelope out into another attenuator and out of the attenuator into filter 2 cutoff. And that's basically it for this one. It's a real simple patch, a drone with independent stereo filter modulation from 2 unipolar LFOs. Okay, time for some tweaking to get things sounding the way I want. Remember, the attack and release times affect the shape and rate of the envelope LFOs. Want the 2 LFOs to be at different rates so we get somewhat unpredictable stereo swells. Patches don't have to be super complicated to sound good, and this one's sure proof of that. We're going to go pretty far with this patch in this video and in the next one, and it's going to get very complicated. Complicated doesn't mean it's going to sound more musical or better, so make sure you use your ears to judge if something is sounding good and if it needs something else or not. So we're just going to play a little something and demo the patch before we move on. Alright, we're back to our starting point patch again. So what if we wanted a drone with filter and VCA modulation? When I say drone, I mean constant output from the Matriarch, not pulses. We did pulses in the first video about VCA modes, and in that video I mentioned that I thought while in amp envelope mode with the amp envelope looping, that if you had sustain or decay up, holding the keys down on the keyboard would keep the VCA open. Because in amp envelope mode, the VCA CV input sums the amp envelope out and whatever you have patched into it. Well, I was wrong. The CV input does sum the envelope and whatever is patched into it, but the looping envelope overrides any sustained key presses. So as you can see, I've got sustain fully up, the envelope's looping, I'm holding keys down, but the sustain has no effect. So the easiest way to do this is to keep it in amp envelope mode and manually modulate the VCA using sustain. And as you can see, that works fine. But let's see if we can figure out a way to do this without using our hands and using an LFO. Okay, so I'm going to go into drone mode, and sounds nice, but let's get rid of the filter modulation so this is easy to hear. And I'll get our amp envelope looping. Remember, in drone mode, the amp envelope isn't set up to modulate anything, so right now that's doing nothing. So I'm going to patch it into the CV input for VCA 1. And our audio goes away, and we've got pulses again. So it's basically the same as being in amp envelope mode. So what if we patched a DC offset into our VCA? Just use the attenuator. And that's getting our DC offset, but not our envelope. So in drone mode, unlike amp envelope mode, the CV input for VCA does not sum the envelope as well as what's ever patched into it. But that doesn't mean we can't do it. So I've patched the envelope out into the top attenuator. The two attenuators on the left of the matriarch have a really cool hidden relationship. If nothing is patched into the input of the lower attenuator, it will act as an offset for whatever is patched into the top attenuator. So the two together act as an attenuverter with DC offset. Sweet. So let's check this out on the scope. So here's our unattenuated envelope from the amp envelope generator. Remember, envelopes are unipolar. And I can now apply an offset with the bottom attenuator. You can hear that the VCA never fully closes now, and you can see on the scope that the envelope is now hovering above the 0 volt line. So we're getting a dynamic drone. Think of our VCA as a tap. If the tap is not fully closed, it lets water out, either a drip or two or a stream depending on how open it is or how large the offset. And you, or I guess the envelope in this case, is turning up the tap higher than lower, but never closing it all the way, always returning to the original offset. Now the super cool thing is we can also invert the envelope with the top attenuator, and can of course apply an offset again to get the behavior we want. The really cool thing is seeing and hearing the inverted tack and release. On the matriarch, the attack on the envelope generators is logarithmic and the release is exponential, but the opposite if the envelope is inverted. Super cool. The shape of an envelope is really important in sound design. This may seem like nitpicking or super nerdy stuff, but trust me, it can really help out a patch. The filter envelope generator can of course easily be inverted by the filter envelope amount knob, but this is the only way to do it for the VCA. Speaking of the filter, let's set up the filter to be modulated by the amp envelope as well. For now, I'll just modulate the filter with the unattenuated CV, but could easily mult to the output of the bottom attenuator and modulate both filter and VCA if we wanted. But I like the sound of an inverted envelope modulating the VCA with positive filter modulation. Let's hear them both positive with a little bit of offset on the VCA. And let's invert the VCA. We need more offset. There we go. This sort of sound kind of reminds me of side chaining. We get a bright attack, but it's at low volume, and as the volume increases, the sound gets darker. Cool. This is giving me an idea. It's a little bit off topic, but why not try it? So I'm going to center the top attenuator. With it centered, we should be getting no VCA modulation because it's fully attenuated. And I'm going to use an LFO to modulate that attenuator. I'm going to attenuate the LFO with little splicks just so it doesn't go crazy. And I'm going to speed up the envelope a little bit. So now we're going to morph between positive and inverted envelopes and everything in between because we're using a triangle LFO. Yeah, this is pretty cool. I haven't thought about doing this before. This is something I'm going to have to explore a little bit more in another patch. Okay, but let's get back on track. Actually, I should show you one more thing. That's a super cool sound, but it uses up 2 of our very valuable attenuverters on the Matriarch. But if you don't need to invert the envelope, you can use a single attenuator to do the same thing. All you need to do is patch the envelope output into the CV control for the attenuverter, and then the output goes to what you're modulating, in this case the VCA. And because what we're actually modulating is the DC offset, we can apply an offset just by not centering the attenuator. You can see the envelope shape is slightly different. We're clipping the CV. We could easily sort that out by attenuating the envelope going into the CV input of the attenuator. Or you could take advantage of this shape that doesn't happen anywhere else on the Matriarch and go for a totally different sound. Okay, now let's modulate the filter with the filter envelope generator. We don't need to patch anything, just use the filter amount knob. And let's slow down the amp envelope generator so we get closer to the drone we're after in the first place. And there, we've pretty much done it. We're modulating the filters with one envelope generator and using DC offset and an envelope generator to modulate the VCA to get a dynamic drone with filter modulation. Cool. So now we just got to tinker a little bit and find the sounds we want. I'm going to start by lowering the offset so we get, for now, very dramatic dynamic differences. I might change that in a moment, but just so we can hear the dynamics. And I'll make some adjustments to the filter cutoff and spacing knob so we get slight variation in our filter modulation from the left and right sides. And of course, add in our secret sauce, the delay. Really cooking. Okay, I think that sounds pretty good. So why don't I play something so we can hear what this sounds like? Let's add in some reverb. And as I play, I'm going to make little small adjustments so our pad evolves as we play. Okay, back to our basic patch again. In that last patch we just did, sounded great, but we still only had one LFO or looping envelope modulating the VCA and another one modulating the VCF. So now the goal is going to be to have one envelope modulating the VCA and another envelope modulating both filters, but inverted. So set up the VCA modulation the way we just did it in the last patch. We're using an envelope generator to modulate the DC offset of an attenuator to modulate the VCA. Okay, and let's change up the sound of this patch a bit. I'm just going to put all the oscillators in tune and flip it over to 4-voice mode. Oh, and I just realized there's something else I should have talked about in that last patch. I want to try to get a kind of a tremolo sound, so I'm going to speed up the amp envelope generator, which is modulating the VCA. Now, because of the shape of the envelope generator, which again is logarithmic exponential, we're not going to get a traditional linear tremolo, but that doesn't mean we can't get a really unique, cool tremolo. So the plan is to get a really fast looping envelope and then take advantage of the clipping we saw in the last patch to smooth out the CV a little bit. So that logarithmic exponential shark fin type wave we saw is less peaky and more of a subtle tremolo. And now I just got to dial in the filter modulation I like. I think I want a dark sound. And of course we need some delay to help us out. That's the ticket. Sounds something like a patch they'd use in Stranger Things now. A little brighter. And need to get that tremolo a little bit more present. Now you can hear it. More of a gentle pulse than a tremolo, but still sounds pretty cool. Okay, that's a beautiful, sad-sounding patch. I really like that one, but it's not what we plan to do, so let's get back on track. Just unpatch this for now. Okay, actually forgot what we were doing. Oh yeah, one envelope to an inverted copy and positive copy. I don't know what the opposite of inverted is. Positive, forward, I don't know. Anyway, one mod source to modulate two destinations differently. But we do want the looping amp envelope to modulate the VCA, so I'm going to patch the attenuator back in. But I'm going to remove that envelope so it doesn't keep pulsing, and we can use the attenuator as a makeshift volume for now. Sorry, I'm tired. I just keep losing focus. Okay, so we got to try to set up our filter modulation. So I'm going to grab a Splix, a passive attenuator. You've seen them before. I've used them in tons of videos. Splix by BoardBrain. Get asked about those a lot. You can get them online or from many synth stores. Anyway, we're patching that into the mult that's being fed by the filter envelope out. So the filter envelope generator is now modulating the cutoff for VCF1. And I'll go out of that same mult. I'm just using a mult cable so that I can patch it into our scope into the input of attenuator 1. And just like in the last patch, we're going to use the secret relationship between attenuator 1 and 2, so that attenuator 2 is an offset, and we're going to plug that into the cutoff for VCF channel 2. And we'll turn up our makeshift volume. So there's the looping filter envelope that's modulating VCF channel 1. Attenuator 1 is centered, so the CV going to channel 2 is fully attenuated, so let's bring that in. You can see that even with the attenuator fully clockwise, it's still a little attenuated, but no big deal because what we want to do is invert it. Filters, depending on where the cutoff is, unlike VCAs, do react to bipolar CV, but we're going to use the offset to raise the CV so that channel 2's filter isn't always way darker than channel 1. For this patch, I want the modulation to kind of be a mirror image. Getting there. Okay, let's play around with this shape and rate of the envelope. We're never going to get a triangle wave, but I want the attack and release to be pretty close. And because the release is exponential, it's going to have to be a little faster than the attack. And with a little more offset, I think we'll be in good shape. And I can fine-tune it with the spacing and cutoff knobs. I want them to be about equal, like I said, but also a little darker. In a dark, warm mood today, I guess. The obvious benefits of using one inverted mod source to modulate two destinations is you can get a mirror image modulation. I guess that's what it would be called. And of course it means we can use the LFOs and sequencers for other things if we want. And let's get our VCA modulation patched in. I want it to be slower than that tremolo we had before. And there we go. Just do some fine tuning until I find something I like. With the VCA modulation, it's pretty quiet, so I'm just going to turn up the master volume. And that's a pretty dynamic patch. Pretty cool. Again, I want it to be a little darker than it is now. Just back off the spacing knob and the cutoff a bit. Okay, let's play something. More tiny little adjustments I think are required. Just small moves until you find the sound that you want. Okay, I think that about does it for this patch. I'm just going to play a little something and then we'll move on to the next one. Oh, and I forgot, I've got the spacing on the delay up at around 3 o'clock. I'm just doing that to give it a little bit more width. And again, I'm just going to make small adjustments as I play, so the patch evolves over time, and I can build it in intensity. Yeah, this patch has totally got that retro sound or Stranger Things vibe going for it. Just add in an arpeggiated sequence with 8th note delay and we could be fighting the Demogorgon. I miss that show. I hope the next season comes out soon. Okay, but I'm tired, so instead of doing the final variation of this patch that I had planned in this video, I'm going to save it for next week. But I did already record a little demo of it, so I'm going to add that in at the end of this for a little teaser. It's a 5-voice mega drone with all sorts of crazy modulation. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you guys learned something.